This is the new 2023 Aston Martin DBX 707, and it's a super SUV. I say that because it has 700 horsepower. The regular DBX has around 540 horsepower, but this has 700. It feels like Hellcat or Shelby GT500 numbers, but it's in an Aston Martin SUV. Of course, that big power comes with a big price tag, around $240,000 to start. And today I'm going to review the DBX 707 and show you all of its quirks and features. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era with free listings. You can list your cool car for free and auction it on Cars and Bids. And we've had some fantastic sales recently, including this wonderful BMW M4 Competition sold for $64,500. This Ford F-150 Lightning sold for over $101,000, and this fantastic BMW M5 brought over $41,000. If you're looking to buy or sell a cool enthusiast car from the modern era, the 1980s and up, Cars and Bids is the place to do it, with daily auctions and great selection and free listings. Check it out at carsandbids.com. All right, time for the quirks and features, the DBX 707. I'm going to start under the hood, but first I want to thank Aston Martin of Newport Beach for providing me with this DBX 707. Aston Martin Newport Beach is the #1 Aston Martin dealership in the world. They have all the cool Aston Martins, and they have a few DBX 707s, which are pretty hard to come by right now. You can check out Aston Martin Newport Beach by clicking the link in the description below. All right, I'm going to start the quirks and features, the DBX 707 in the most important place, and that would be under the hood. Although first let's talk about getting under the hood, which is kind of insane. You go into the driver's footwell looking for a latch and it's not there. Instead, it's over on the passenger side. This is the hood release latch. I guess when the DBX is moved over from right-hand drive to left-hand drive, they move over the steering wheel and the gauges and all the controls, but not the hood latch, which stays in the passenger footwell. Doesn't make any sense. But you get yourself over that, you open up the hood, and you see the twin-turbo V8. Now, this is the very same Mercedes-Benz twin-turbo V8 that's in the regular DBX, but here it makes a lot more power. In the standard DBX, around 540 horsepower. This is 700 horsepower. Hellcat territory, a massive figure. And there's a lot of changes made to give it this extra horsepower. You got new turbochargers, you got new ECU, new induction, new exhaust, all sorts of changes under the hood, but the upshot is almost 700 horsepower. Now, technically, it's 697 horsepower and 707 PS, and that's where the DBX 707 gets its name from, but we're splitting hairs. 700 horsepower, give or take a few, doesn't really matter. The point is, it's 160 horsepower more than the standard DBX. It's 60 horsepower more than the Lamborghini Urus. In fact, it's more power than the new Lamborghini Urus Performante. This also has more power than the Bentley Bentayga W12 Speed, which is the top version of that, and the Porsche Cayenne Turbo SE Hybrid. More power in the DBX. It's got more power than just about everything. And as you can imagine, that massive power translates to massive performance. Car and Driver got this 0 to 60 in 3.1 seconds, which makes it tied with the Urus for the quickest SUV it has ever tested. That's what you get with 700 horsepower. And as you can imagine, this being opened up a bit from a standard DBX, it sounds great. Take a listen to the 707. And by the way, speaking of the exhaust, one fantastic new feature of the 707 is something Aston calls loud start mode. If you go to start this vehicle and you hold down one of the shift pedals, it starts louder than it would if you didn't. It's like telling the car that you want to start loud so that everybody looks at you. Take a listen to loud start mode. But it's not just the extra power that makes the DBX 707 way more appealing than a standard DBX. Everything about this vehicle is just more. From your angle, you can see the front grille, which is absolutely massive. Aston says 27% larger than the one in the standard DBX for better airflow. You also have air intakes on either side of the front grille, so you can get even more air flowing through, coming to the engine to help give you that more power. And you have a rather large front splitter here. You can see gives the car a sportier look up front, presumably helps with aerodynamics, exclusive to the 707. And there's more when you move around back. One other upgrade is the giant rear diffuser, which you can see, another very distinctive change separating the 707 from the standard DBX. And the exhaust too. Regular DBX has just dual exhaust. This has quad exhaust because it's the high performance version, and that's what you do. And another change compared to the standard DBX is this hole in the rear bumper. They have these on both sides. Aston Martin calls them air outlets, and I guess they're used to channel air, improve the aerodynamics. The 707 has it, the regular models don't. And speaking of channeling air, the 707 also has air channels in front of the wheels. You can see this one here on the rocker panels in front of the rear wheels, I guess to improve airflow and aero, and you also have one directly in front of the front wheels that apparently serves a similar purpose. So upgraded aerodynamics in the 707 in addition to all the other stuff. And on the subject of more, the DBX 707 also has more width in the back. The rear track is almost an inch wider compared to a standard DBX, which gives it more stability around corners and at high speeds. And it helps accommodate the massive tires. These are 23-inch wheels, which is huge enough. But then width is also massive, 325 width rear tires. It's like a supercar tire, except in an SUV. And then there's the brakes. Carbon ceramic brakes come standard on the 707. The front rotor is 16.5 inches in diameter, one of the largest I've ever heard of. The rear rotor is 15.5 inches, so massive fronts and massive rears, huge brakes, also more for this car. And there's still more with the 707. For instance, the rear spoiler is longer than the one in the regular DBX, giving it, I guess, more downforce, but probably just a more aggressive look. And speaking of the look, one easy way to tell the 707 apart from a standard DBX, if all else fails, the big brakes and the diffusers and everything, is the front end. The 707 has this horizontal front running light, as you can see. The regular DBX doesn't. So if you're looking at one of these and you see the horizontal light, then you know it's the 707 and its massive power. And next we move inside, where there are quite a few DBX quirks and features in here, one of which is the gear selector situation that is still mounted on the dashboard, just like in the regular DBX. You can see PR on one side in the center, ND on the other, with the engine start-stop button in the middle. You have this push-button gear selector, which is certainly unorthodox, but distinctive to these cars. Now, speaking of the gear selector, the transmission in this car is completely new compared to the standard DBX. The regular DBX uses a traditional torque converter automatic. This uses a wet clutch automatic. The thinking is it'll get faster shifts, be quicker off the line, and so it's an improvement in terms of performance. Now, speaking of the transmission, there is a new race start mode that is exclusive to the 707. To access it, you go into Sport or Sport Plus drive mode, and then you hold your foot on the brake and on the gas at the same time, and that activates a launch control so you can take off fast as possible in your high-performance SUV. And speaking of drive modes, accessing your drive modes is a little different in the 707 than in the regular DBX. That's because the 707 has this little dial here in the center, and you twist it to adjust the drive mode that you're in. And there are 5 different choices. Individual, which of course you can configure. GT, which is kind of a relaxed basic drive mode. Then you have Sport and Sport Plus, your performance drive modes. And there's also a terrain drive mode for off-roading, which I suspect won't get a lot of use with 23-inch wheels. But it's there in case you want to get on some rough road in your DBX. But anyway, on to the rest of the quirks and features in this interior. One very notable one is the carbon fiber. Acres of carbon fiber everywhere. The door panel, the center console, you can see a lot of carbon fiber there. The shift paddles are carbon fiber, the door sills, lots of carbon fiber to fit in with the sporty theme of the 707. And also trimming this interior is green stitching. You can see bright green stitching all over everything everything. The seats are covered in it, the dashboard, bright green stitching everywhere, the door panel, everything has this stitching to match the exterior color, which Aston Martin calls Lime Essence. Obviously very bright, very loud, and very expensive. It is $11,000 extra, but it certainly will stand out from all of the regular DBXs you see driving around. Now, another interesting quirk of the 707 is the infotainment system, which is old school Mercedes-Benz technology, unfortunately. Aston Martin gets its engines from Mercedes-Benz and also its tech, but they don't get the very latest system, so this one is a little outdated, and it's not even a touchscreen. You control it with this little wheel in the center, you adjust that, and that adjusts what's on the screen. It's reasonably intuitive, works pretty well. Mercedes-Benz used this system for a long time, but it certainly doesn't feel like the most modern, up-to-date tech. The good news is a lot of systems and controls aren't integrated into the infotainment screen, including most of your climate controls. They're directly below the center screen, and you can see there's a row of switches here to change like your temperature, your airflow, and below that there's capacitive touch buttons. You just tap it to turn on things like the heated and cooled seats, tap, and then it's on. No actual physical buttons here, which does seem kind of futuristic. Now, below that in the center console, you can also see a lot of different controls that aren't integrated into that center screen. A lot of different buttons here that control various different items, including your sport exhaust. You press that to turn on the sport exhaust, a loud sound, and your sport suspension is also controlled here. You press this and you can dial different levels of sport suspension for your on-track usage. But anyway, other interesting quirks and features in this interior. One is the massive sunroof. You can see this giant glass panel above basically the entire interior of the DBX. The regular model has this too, but it really is worth pointing out it's absolutely huge, and of course there is a sunshade that can cover it completely if you don't want the sun beating down on you. Unfortunately, because it's one big panel, it can't open like some sunroofs, but it does give you kind of a panoramic view of the world in back. Also interesting and new for the DBX this year is soft close doors, meaning you don't have to slam the doors. You can just sort of get them close to closing, and then they will automatically and electronically pull themselves closed and latch completely. And that way you don't have to hear the loud sounds of a door slam. You can have a much more luxurious experience just soft closing it. Also worth pointing out with these doors, if you look inside the hinge area, you will see a hydraulic. I promise you, your car's door does not have that. The thinking with this is that it keeps the door open at whatever angle you want it open. Unlike most cars that have like 2 or 3 door positions, this will stay open basically anywhere, and it'll try to hold it in place on a hill also, a hydraulic like you might have for a tailgate. That's pretty cool and rare to see in a door. Also worth pointing out in here, in addition to the engine and the infotainment system, you do have some other Mercedes-Benz items if you know where to look. For example, the turn signal stalk, which is also the wiper stalk coming off the steering column, is from Mercedes-Benz. That's an older piece of Mercedes-Benz switchgear, relatively common in Mercedes-Benz models, and it's here in the DBX. You also have a Mercedes-Benz control for closing the tailgate from the outside. These little buttons here at the base of the tailgate, you press them to close it. Those are borrowed straight from Mercedes-Benz. They've been using those same buttons forever. So it's an Aston Martin, but it has some Mercedes-Benz throughout. And next we move into the back of the DBX 707, and I will say pretty good interior space back here. Good knee room, headroom, legroom. It's all pretty good, pretty practical in back. Although, if you want more front seat space and you start pushing the front seat back, it could get a little uncomfortable for rear passengers because you have this hard carbon fiber shell in the back of the front seats. This won't exactly feel too good on your knees or your body if you're pushing up against it, but it is the price you pay for a performance car with a sports seat in carbon fiber like the DBX 707. But you should have good enough space back here that you don't have to do that. And there's also some other nice luxuries in back. For example, your own rear climate control system, which is nice to see, and heated and cooled rear seats, which is very luxurious. Not too many cars have cooled rear seats, but this one does. And next up, I want to get into the cargo area, but before I do that, I want to talk about the rear end of the DBX, which is still a little unorthodox to say the least. You have this light bar going across the entire rear of the car, but it goes up in the center where there's this hump, and it certainly looks a little strange, very distinctive to the DBS. I hesitate to call it ugly, but it's definitely different. Anyway, you open up the tailgate, you get into the cargo area back here. You can see it's a pretty decent sized cargo area. Not massive or huge, but big enough, reasonably practical, and a couple of cool quirks back here. One, you have these little buttons over on the side that allow you to lower the car from the cargo cargo area, which means if you have something really heavy that you're trying to get in there and it's a little too high to lift it up, you can press the button, lower the suspension, and make it easier to load something in. You also have little buttons over on the other side to unlatch the rear seats. Now, unfortunately, they don't fold down automatically like in a lot of other luxury SUVs, but you can at least unlatch them here and then go around and fold them down from the seats themselves. The most interesting quirk back here, though, is undoubtedly the umbrella, which is a common Aston Martin accessory they've included in vehicles for years because it rains a lot in the UK, and why not offer an umbrella with a British car? It seems perfect, like it just was meant to be. Now, on the subject of stuff that comes with this car, let's talk pricing. The regular DBX starts around $190,000. This will start around $240,000. And just to be clear, the regular DBX is still going to be on sale as sort of the entry-level model. If you want more power, more performance, you can upgrade to the 707. Now, $240,000 will be the base price, but average sticker prices are probably going to be in the $270,000 to $290,000 range for these 707 models. That undercuts a lot of rivals, including the Lamborghini Urus, which I suspect will be this car's closest competition. Urus starts around $230,000, so about the same as this, a little less, but remember, it's also less power. Now, you can upgrade to the Urus Performante, the high-performance version, but you still have less power in the DBX 707, and that one starts around $280,000. So the Urus Performante's starting price will be around the average window sticker price for one of these. Figure around $310,000 to $330,000 for a well-equipped Urus Performante, making this seem like a little bit of a bargain if that's possible at this price point. And by the way, one other item I want to mention is the key. It looks cool, it feels heavy, it's a special key, Aston Martin written along the side, but my favorite part is at the top where you have the Aston Martin logo encased in this like glass rectangle that looks very, very cool, fitting a cool Aston Martin. All right, driving the DBX 707. I have not actually driven a regular DBX yet, believe it or not. I filmed a video on one a long time ago, but it was a pre-production car, I couldn't drive it, and I never, for whatever reason, got back and got into a DBX. So this is really my first DBX opportunity, and boy, is it a good one. The thing about the DBX is, initially when it first came out, I thought it looked good, Aston Martin, good brand name, but it seemed like a lot of money for not enough performance. 0 to 60 in 4 seconds just isn't that amazing when you're spending $250, which is what a lot of them sticker at. That was a little disappointing, and I think a lot of people thought that because DBX sales have not been incredibly strong. But now, things have changed a little bit. I mean, suddenly this DBX is incredibly appealing. You now have 700 horsepower, up from 540. 540 was low, 700 is strong. It's bigger than just about everything else in this segment, and that makes this car particularly appealing, especially as the rivals have all gotten far, far, far more expensive. Oh, and that sound. Obviously, that's a Mercedes-Benz powertrain, and I get that, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, it still sounds amazing. Oh, yeah. Now, in addition to the sound, I do want to point out the car is incredibly, incredibly quick. Oh, jeez. It's just so fast. They say 0 to 60 in 3.1 feels every bit that fast, and it has the sound to prove it. You do feel nicely removed from the road. It's actually, aside from the engine noise, I'm not hearing a lot. I don't hear a lot of tire noise, certainly not hearing from the cars around me. It just feels fast and then quiet and luxurious, which is kind of what you want. It's like muscles in a business suit. That's kind of how it feels. Now, it feels less like that when the car is lime essence on the outside. It's a little bit more showy and look at me, but I imagine the vast, vast, vast majority of people who buy these are not going to choose anything close to this color, and then it will be like a muscular car and like a silver. It'll feel nice and understated, but still incredibly fast. Now, one drawback to this car is tech is just not at the level of some like really, really high quality new rivals. At the end of the day, you know, USB-A instead of USB-C throughout this interior. There's no driver assist. It has adaptive cruise control, but not like automatic steering and stuff like so many other cars. Obviously, another big one is the old Mercedes-Benz infotainment system. It just has, there's some things that are behind, and that's a drawback of Aston Martin in generally, just sort of the reality of the brand, because they don't have a big brand who's sort of shielding them and giving them new tech. But you do get some amazing benefits. One is this tremendous powertrain. Obviously, also another is it's just unique and distinctive. You know, one big problem I have with the Urus is It's not that different from the Cayenne Turbo S, the Bentley Bentayga, the Audi Q8. I mean, there are a lot of similarities between those cars. This is a totally different, totally bespoke vehicle. And honestly, this does have the effect of kind of changing my opinion about the DBX. You know, before I thought it was just, it's fine. You know, it's a nice luxury SUV, but whatever. Now it's like, okay, this has so much power, you have to start to take it really seriously. Now, another important thing to point out about this DBX, specifically the 707, it really steers and handles well. And that actually surprises me because it's big. It's sort of a long vehicle. They made it that way to be practical on the inside, unlike some of these luxury SUVs, which are kind of compromised. This one has good rear seat space, it has good cargo space, so it has a decent footprint on the road, but it feels really, really, really sharp. I'm actually surprised how quickly it rotates. There is a shockingly small amount of body roll. This vehicle is really, really ready to turn, very precise, very quick to steer. It doesn't feel that different from a sports car. It's honestly on par with some of the better, it's on par with the best handling SUVs I've ever driven. So to sum it up, DBX 707, here's where I'm coming in on this car. Drawbacks are the tech is not great compared to basically every rival in terms of driver assist, in terms of the infotainment, it's just not all that great. The transmission is a little bit harsher than a standard automatic transmission with a torque converter. That's intentional in this car because it's a performance car, so the shifts are quicker, but they're a little bit harsher, and so that's just something you're dealing with. And then it's expensive, and I want to be clear, I don't think it's that expensive compared to rivals, but it's an expensive car. This one has a $277,000 sticker. That's big money. Regardless of where rivals fall, it's still expensive. This car performs a lot better. It's faster, 0 to 60. Straight line acceleration is fantastic. Steering and handling is excellent. I think this car totally changes the value equation on the DBX, which I initially thought was not that good of a deal. I don't feel that about this one. I think that this suddenly starts to seem like, well, actually, if you want a performance luxury SUV, it does kind of feel like a pretty good number against its rivals. You are getting a very special, very high performing, very exciting, and I think attractive car, and there's a lot of nice things about that. And it definitely feels more special than an Urus, which is based on all these other Audis and Porsches and stuff. You know, Aston Martin, you do feel like you're driving something more special, more distinctive, and I think that, in addition to all the performance benefits, helps. And so that's the Aston Martin DBX 707. The regular DBX is a little light on power considering the competition, but this is far more competitive in the ultra-luxury, ultra-performance SUV segment. 700 horsepower is truly amazing. And now it's time to give the DBX 707 a DOUGSCORE. And the DOUGSCORE is here, 69 out of 100, which places the DBX 707 here against rivals like the Lamborghini Urus, the Cayenne Turbo GT, and the Model X Plaid. The DBX 707 is more fun than basically all of this stuff. Its 34 weekend score ties the Urus and beats out the Cayenne Turbo S Coupe. But the DBX 707 drops a few points in the daily categories as it's simply behind on technology compared to rivals. Still, this is a fantastic effort from Aston Martin and a truly thrilling car to drive, and if you want an SUV that'll keep a smile permanently on your face, this is the one.